Israel completes its invasion stage of the war against Gaza as they turn their attention to invading Rafah in the deep southern Gaza Strip. Also, the U.S. sends a warning to Iran. And who is to blame for the famine occurring among the Palestinian people? We're going to dive into all of this and bring in our foreign affairs correspondent, Lisa Daftari, who is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She's joining me now from Los Angeles. Lisa, great to have you on once again. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so Lisa, there's so much to unpack here. Let's start with Israel. So the Israel Defense Forces announced Sunday they're finished their invasion stage of the war, and they're now turning the focus to a possible future invasion plan of Rafah in the deep south of the Gaza Strip. So high-ranking Israeli officials have told media that this move was unrelated to pressure from the White House or the accidental killing of 7 aid workers last week. So Lisa, do you believe this to be true? What are you hearing?
So, Jeanette, to break this all down, which is very, very complex, we have to start with the division of two different wars going on. One is what's actually going on in the military sense on the ground in the Middle East, and the other is the information war, what we hear in the media, how the media is spinning this, and the different narratives and criticisms that come out of that information war. Regarding the military war, it's absolutely true what you said. The IDF has determined that they have eradicated the threat that is coming from Gaza and will now put their attention on Rafah. If they need to go into Rafah, they will go into Rafah, regardless of what Kamala Harris says, regardless of what's coming out of the White House, regardless of world condemnation that's coming from the mainstream media and different activist groups that perhaps don't know or don't want to know what's going on the ground, or are just denying the fact that there are terrorists embedded in Rafah. If you recall, just a few weeks ago, 2 of the hostages, civilians, were found in Rafah. So we have plenty of reason to believe that the IDF needs to go into Rafah. I also want to remind everyone that we are 6 months into this war, regardless of, again, where you're getting your information from, what narratives you're hearing. Those innocent hostages have not been returned. So when people scream ceasefire, ceasefire, let's just remember that this war could end if the terrorists surrender and give back the hostages, but they keep refusing to. How many times have we had potential ceasefire proposals on the table? They have been agreed to by Israel, but rejected by Hamas, again, a terror organization. So there's a lot on the table here, but again, we have to separate between the actual military war, the facts, what's going on the ground, and what is being spun by the media, by activists, by university, by academians, and others who they fall on these tropes, and they're anti-Semitic, and they're anti-Zionist, and they're anti-Israel. And that is a whole different discussion as to why the world perpetuates these kinds of lies and misrepresentations. Obviously, nobody wants to see that death toll go up, whether it's on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. Nobody wants to see children in the middle of this war. Nobody wants to see this war go on. And I am sure that civilians on both sides want this war to end. But again, those hostages have to come back, the terrorists have to surrender, and we have to really understand that this is an existential threat to Israel, where guns and bombs are being pointed and fired at Israel from many, many directions, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, whether it's Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, insurgencies in Syria and Iraq, and of course, it is all being puppeteered by Iran's regime.
Okay, now you mentioned civilians there. So we've heard that some people of Gaza have returned to their homes, which are mostly destroyed now, but many still can't return due to IDF preserving control of northern and central Gaza. What are you hearing?
Right. So look, this is a war-torn area right now. They have done their best job, and I have interviewed dozens, whether they're from the IDF or actual American military experts, who have told me that Israel has done a very precise job as best as possible. Obviously, there are casualties, there are mistakes that are made, but with regards to looking at this from a military standpoint, they have done their best to remove civilians from harm's way. And again, many homes destroyed, many lives are torn apart. And this is really the reality of this war. But again, before October 7th, we were covering a lot of protests on the ground in Gaza, and those were Gazans who were protesting Hamas, life under Hamas. Think about the lives of any individual who has to live at the hands of a terror group, like Iranians who have to live at the hands of the Islamic Republic. Just like, right now we're watching as Gazans have no other choice. These are Palestinians who are at the mercy of their own government. So when you find them in harm's way, again, the question is, who is to blame for this? Why doesn't their government surrender? Why don't they give back the hostages? Why do they ask these civilians to hide hostages in their homes, as has been found in many cases? Why are they asking, why do they teach Palestinian children arithmetic through death and through terrorism and through, again, the Palestinians are the biggest victims of this terrorism and and Hamas. And I think that that's a very important thing to underscore here.
Famine has been a huge issue in Gaza, and all fingers, of course, around the world are pointing at Israel as being the cause of this. But Lisa, there is data being reported showing that Israel is not causing the Gazan famine. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about this?
Sure. And again, this goes back to the information war, right? So over the weekend, we got confirmation that when that aid truck was attacked and there was missiles flying and people lost their lives and they couldn't get the aid and the Palestinians were just jumping. I don't know if you saw the footage. It was something that, again, circulated very broadly in this information war. Israel was to blame, and information came out that it was actually Hamas that was started firing. This is all over the weekend. But again, nobody changes their minds about these things because they have made up their minds to say Israel is responsible. More aid has come into Gaza than before the war right now because they want to make sure that that aid goes. But again, how is that aid going to be dispersed in a way that's fair to the Palestinian people and not to Hamas, that it's not taken by the government? There's a reason why you see these poor Palestinians jump on top of that aid truck. It's because they know that their government won't allocate those the elements properly, or to get them the goods properly, or to get them food, or etc. If Hamas is their elected government, Hamas is responsible to get them the aid properly, and they don't. And that this is again the misinformation that's out there, that Israel is blocking the aid, that they're firing on the aid trucks. There was an interview by a lot of these Arab language media that interviewed the aid truck driver. And he told a very different story than what you saw in the media about who was attacking, how it went down. And, just again, the Palestinian people are the victims of their own government. And of course, this is yet another example of how we have to eradicate terrorism from the West, from the East, from the Middle East, all of it.
So you're saying Hamas is hoarding food, basically, and not giving it to
They're
own
not
people.
allowing, right, and they're hoarding the supplies. They're not letting people get through. They are putting the people in harm's way, whether they're using them as human shields, whether they're not allowing the hospitals to properly run as hospitals, but they're becoming headquarters to jihad. And again, with the aid, it's not being properly dispersed. So that's why you have Palestinians who cannot get the basic food items that they need.
It's very sad for sure. Okay, so Lisa, last week an airstrike suspected to have been carried out by Israel eliminated 7 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officers, so including the organization's Syrian chief, General Mohammed Zahadi. So Lisa, will there be any retaliation for this?
Well, there have been many threats, and Iran's regime says it's coming. This is obviously something that was a big hit, meaning these were major terror assets, major brains behind the terrorism. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were having a planning meeting. These are the brains behind so many terror strikes and plots, including October 7th. So this was a big hit, both in terms of morale and in terms of strategy. So Iran's regime won't take that. They're going to actually retaliate to show that they won't. They're not going to be the ones to take a hit. Now, this puts Israel obviously on its guard, regardless of whether it's actual inside Israel or around the world. Iran's regime has said it may strike an embassy, which means it could be anywhere, Canada, United States, anywhere. But obviously everyone is on high alert. The United States as well knows about this. The CIA said that there would have been an attack over the weekend, but obviously all eyes are on this and going to watch to see what happens. But the regime has doubled down to say that retaliation is coming.
Yeah, I mean, well, Iran is saying that it received a response about this from the Biden administration. So, Lisa, what message did the U.S. send to them?
Look, this is what's very unfortunate about this war is that it's now taking place on the timeline of an American presidential election year. And that truly is affecting so many of the rhetoric, the decisions, the pivoting coming from the White House. Look, regardless of who is in the White House, Republican or Democrat, for as long as the state of Israel has been around, Israel is a major strategic and security ally for the United States in the Middle East. And for that reason, we usually don't see wavering on our position, our staunch support of Israel as a democratic ally. But now you're seeing some pivoting because there are elements within the left, within the Democrat Party, that are putting pressure on the White House to not be so pro-Israel. And that's why you're seeing some distance now between President Biden and his Israel policy, as well as State Department, Antony Blinken, who has warned, Israel and the IDF, has said that Bibi has to go. So many things that we would not have seen if we were not in this position of having this election year. So now Biden understands that there will be a retaliation, but he has warned Iran's regime to just stay away from American assets in the region, which, look, it throws our ally Israel under the bus yet again. And it just shows how worried the Biden administration is in not being as transparent as we'd like to be about how involved the United States is in this war, for fear of being in a war in an election year. So we saw the Houthis striking at U.S. assets and U.S. ships, and we said, no, that has nothing to do with Iran's regime. The Houthis came off of the U.S. terror list. We tried to separate, the White House tried to separate October 7th from what was happening with the Houthi attacks. Look, Iran's regime is pulling the puppet strings. So we have seen blood on their hands. They have killed Americans in Syria, in Iraq. Obviously, the Houthis now striking like ping pong all over, the place and retaliating here and there. But, at the end of the day, trying to kind of make the narrative not so heightened and escalated because the Biden administration wants to create that separation. But it doesn't change the reality of what's going on the ground. It doesn't change the reality of what Iran's regime wants out of all of this.
Okay, so turning our eyes now to another part of the world here, Lisa. Microsoft has warned that China and North Korea will use artificial intelligence to influence elections this year. So they allege that the two countries use AI-generated videos, pictures, memes, recordings to create and disrupt. We're looking at fake news stories, basically. This is kind of alarming. What can you tell us about this?
It's alarming, yes. Surprising, no. I'm surprised they left Russia and Iran's regime off of that list. Look, our enemies, our adversaries, all around the world have always had an eye on U.S. elections, especially more recently. Yeah. The nations that we just listed have also beefed up their cyber capabilities, have interfered where they can. Obviously, social media being an easy target. And now AI gives them yet another tool. So each presidential election, so 4 years have gone by, more sophistication in terms of the tools that they can use, but the agenda has always been there to interfere and use propaganda and misinformation to kind of interfere and to push the election in one way or another. Now, here in the United States, 4 years ago, they said they did try to interfere, but they didn't really affect the outcome of the election. So we shall see in this case. They try to interfere, but will they actually affect the outcome of the election?
Yeah, I was going to ask what you think. I mean, it's an election year in the U.S. as well. Is there any chance that this could be prevalent as well?
Yeah,
It seems
absolutely,
like it
absolutely, it'll
could.
be prevalent. You know, we
Yes.
have social media, we have AI, we have, where there's a will, there's a way, right? So we know that they want to interfere, and now they have more tools than ever at their disposal. And look, Americans, for the most part, especially the White House, they're looking the other way. We're involved in a war. Ukraine and Russia rages on. We have our crisis at our southern border. It's affecting our northern border with Canada, as you all know. So the economy, gas prices, food prices, there's so much going on that, this is, again, an easy target, an easy way to really insert themselves.
Yeah, for sure, Lisa. Looks like we're about out of time here, but once again, thanks so much for joining us today. We love having you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. That is Lisa Daftari, editor in chief of the Foreign Desk, joining me today from Los Angeles.